Hello, everyone. We're looking at exploring world history, lesson number 36. And we're going to be talking about ancient India, okay? Ancient India is, these places are known as the Indus River civilizations, okay? And they started around 2000 BC. There's some early civilizations. They all start kind of in northern Indian subcontinent, and they all form around the area of the Indus River, which is a very long river. And they run simultaneously, kind of as the Egyptians and the Sumerian civilizations, okay? When you look at these, we find two major cities where we get a lot of our information from. One is Harappa and one is Mohenjo-Daro. And these cities were discovered in 1920, and they were larger than any of the Sumerian city-states that we have, and they rival the size of the older kingdom of Egypt, okay? And they, like I said, kind of stretch all along this 950-mile area of the Indus River, and that's where we get the Indus River civilizations. These cities had straight streets with regular city blocks. The buildings were similar in size and used the same brick, and they had very efficient sewer systems throughout all of their cities. The people groups that were there were very skilled in building and surveying. Their cities were literally laid out on grids, and you could just go through them very easily. They also had different crops. They had large irrigation systems. And the Indus River civilizations were the first, earliest known people who produced cotton. They traded their crops, they traded cloth, they traded precious metals and jewelry and stone carvings. They worshipped primarily a mother goddess, but they had some other gods, and in some circumstances they worshiped animals and trees. And these Indus River civilizations kind of flourished until around 1500 BC. So they started around 2000 BC and flourished for 500 years or so to around 1500 BC. So that's kind of a generalization of all of these different civilization groups that are in the area. And what we want to do now is just kind of get into some specific details of different groups that were there. And the first one we want to talk about are the Aryans. The beginning of the Aryans, we're not exactly sure. They may have come from the area north of the Caucasus Mountains, somewhere between the Black and Caspian Seas. We do know they invaded the Indus River civilizations. The Aryan means noble. And they kind of came into this area and set themselves up as the nobles, as the rulers of the area. Their family and village life was extremely important. It was of central importance to the Aryan way of life. The tribes were led by the Raja, or the chief, and the Raja usually selected a leader for each individual village. So there was basically the primary chief and then somebody over each individual village. There were multiple extended families in the same house. They jointly held property. They would help the sick and elderly. There was a male head of the household, and he would lead the religious ceremonies. He would arrange marriages for the families. He was the family representative to the other villages when there was decisions that needed to be made. The women also were very active in the early Aryan society, though. They participated in civic affairs. Some of them were warriors. They would literally fight battles. They become, over time though, they become more isolated and kind of devoted more to housework at that point. The written language was developed, and it's called Sanskrit, and it was initially mostly used by priests, okay? There was social classes that started to form and castes that started to form. These early classes were very simple. There were warriors, kind of the top. There was priests. There was commoners, and then people, all these leftover people who couldn't kind of be put into a specific class. Later, there was just the four classes: the warriors, the Brahmins, which were the priests, the middle class, and these were landowners, merchants, and herders, and then other lower class, servants, peasants, non-Aryans. And as war became less and less important over the years, the Brahmins replaced the warrior as the highest social class. So as things became more and more civilized, the need for the warriors decreased, and so the priests kind of claimed that top spot. And eventually this kind of leads into a caste system, which is a classification hardened in these groups into a caste system. And membership in each caste was primarily by birth. That was it. You were born into whatever you were born into, and that was it. The jobs you were allowed to have were strictly defined by what caste you were born into. You couldn't marry outside of your caste system, and this continues in a lot of places in India today. Eventually, the castes are divided into 3,000 plus subcastes. Okay, this is just extremely crazy how many there are. And ultimately, the Brahmins still have the top spot, and all the way down to these different castes, these different subcastes, till you get to the outcasts. And the outcasts were outside of any caste. They were, and still are in some cases, considered untouchables. People that you didn't want anything to do with. They couldn't get jobs, they couldn't get married, they couldn't do anything except for somebody that was also an outcast. They're completely looked down upon, and it's extremely problematic. So that was what was kind of going on with the Aryans and this civilization. During this time, you get two major religions that kind of form during and are designed. So Hinduism is the first one. And the design of Hinduism is that it's not based on one person's ideas or teachings, okay? It's a blend of Aryan beliefs and the different people they actually conquered. So it's kind of this combination of several different things. And ultimately, it's an attempt to express the truth about the meaning of life and the individual's place inside the universe. And the Hindu doctrine basically comes from the Brahma, which is a single unifying force that is present in everything and every person. Nothing exists, they say, apart from Brahma. Okay? Nothing exists except for Brahma. The different gods in the Hindu religion is three major gods, okay? Brahma, which is the creator god, Vishnu, which is the preserver god, and Shiva, which is the destroyer god. They were allowed to worship other gods as well, but mostly they felt that these were different aspects of the god Brahma. So, they would have, gods of nature and different things, but they felt like mostly all these other gods were some type of aspect of Brahma. And then you also had Indra, which was the warrior god, okay? And so Hindu thought kind of went like this. Every individual soul is part of the universal soul, or Atman. The pursuit of unworthy goals keeps a soul separated from the Atman. And worthy goals, then, you need to have, right? And so worthy goals include devotion to truth, respect for life, and detachment from the world. Further, Hindu thought would go on and talk about the goal of life is to be free from one's individual life and to be unified with the Atman. And this takes more than one life. So there's no way you can reach it in your first life. So you just have to continue to be reincarnated and reincarnated and reincarnated as you continue to work these things out. There's a strong belief in karma in Hinduism, and karma is the sum total of all the actions of a person's life that affects their next life, right? So we kind of, in Western world, misuse the word karma, but it's according to them, it's the sum total of all actions of a person's life that affects their next life. Then you also have the Brahmins, and these Brahmins were the most important, right? We talked about that in the caste system. They were the most important. They were the priests. They were the ones who were supposed to preserve the religious text. They were the ones who performed the religious rituals. And by 600 BC, they believed they were the closest to the Atman and thus the highest caste. Okay, so that's how they took over that spot, saying they were closest to the Atman. So we get different writings from Hindu teachings, okay? You get the Bhagavad Gita, which is a song of the god, and it's an Aryan work, it's an epic work, it's part of a longer epic of the Aryan ways. You also have another important writing of the Hindu teachings called the Vedas. These were religious writings from around 1500 to 1000 BC. They provide information about the Aryan life. Then also you have the Upanishads. These started as oral teachings and developed around 800 to 600 BC. And they offer ideas about the meaning of life and reincarnation, okay? They're three major writings of the Hindu faith. The second major religion that was kind of brought about during this time period is Buddhism, okay? Buddhism is originated as an offshoot of Hinduism. It was begun by Siddhartha Gautama, who's aka Buddha, okay? And he was a follower of Hinduism. He was born around 563 BC. And at one day, he is 29 years old, and he came in succession upon an old man, a sick man, and a corpse. So basically, he's traveling through life, and he sees an old man, and then a sick man, and then a corpse. Seeing these in the way that he did affected him deeply. He left his family and lived as a beggar to try to find the causes of suffering. Gautama did not find the answers in the Hindu writings or in a life of self-denial. After a 6-year pursuit, one day while sitting under a tree, he believed that he was enlightened. Buddha means enlightened one. And this title is how he came to be known. Gautama began teaching his beliefs to others. He organized groups of monks and nuns who were especially dedicated to following his philosophy, okay? He eventually dies in 483 BC, and this is he identifies 4 truths, okay, of Buddhism. So the 4 truths of Buddhism are identified as these, okay? 1, suffering and misery are universal. 2, the cause of suffering is desire. So the things that we desire and that we want causes our suffering. So the way to overcome suffering is to overcome our desires. So the goal of life, then, is to release from desire in the state of nirvana, which involves wanting nothing. So if you could reach nirvana, you would want nothing, and so you'd be free from suffering. The 4th truth is that the way to escape pain and suffering is what Buddha called the middle way, made up of the 8-fold path, okay? So there's an 8-fold path, a way that you can reach nirvana, in essence, okay? So these are the 8 things, the 8-fold path: compassion, knowledge of the good, good intentions, right speech, right conduct, pursuit of a proper livelihood, mindfulness, and meditation, okay? Buddhism also deals with a lot of philosophy, okay? And so its philosophy adapted some of the elements of Hinduism. So there was karma, there was reincarnation. It believed that the world is a place of suffering from which people want to escape. It says Buddha did not believe in the soul or any other gods, okay, or any of the gods, okay? Buddha rejected the caste and that the Brahmin were the most important. He didn't believe in any of those things, okay? There are a collection of Buddha's sayings. Remember, Buddha was the founder, and that's what he became known as, Buddha. And these are called the 3 baskets of wisdom. Eventually, Buddhism kind of gets split into divisions, okay? One is the way that Buddha outlined, strictly how he initially laid it out. And the other is kind of an exalted Buddha, where followers of Buddha eventually exalted him into some status of a god, basically. So Buddha became a god and said the others teachers had achieved enlightenment also, okay? And so ultimately the goal is to achieve enlightenment, and they're saying that Buddha eventually reached that, so he reached that god status. And so those were the 2 primary religions that were in this area and that came up during this time period through the Aryans, okay? After the Aryans, we have a few different groups of people that we want to talk about. that were in this time period and in this area. And it all starts with, like I said, the decline of the Aryans. They start to weaken from within with some intertribal wars that were going on. And so somewhere around 1000 BC, they start their true decline and are no longer kind of applicable to the area. And of course, you hit the Persians. Okay, the Persians controlled northwestern India, and starting around about 512 BC, they come into the area and take it. You have the kingdom of Magadha in northwestern India. He combines with other groups and extends his control basically all the way south to the Ganges River, and it becomes the very first empire in all of India. Okay, the kingdom of Magadha. Then you have the Maurya dynasty. It kind of arises around 321 BC. It gains control over all of northern India. They build this luxurious capital on the Ganges River. They have beautiful city, beautiful gardens, all kinds of stuff going on. They use homing pigeons and spies to go through the whole empire that they built up. You have a man named Ashoka. He's one of the Mauryan Empire leaders. He extends his empire all the way across the central plateau of India by war. He's a very warlike person. And he basically goes to war very often to expand his empire. But as he does this, war starts to bother him, and he starts to be really bothered by death and the huge amount of death that he kind of implemented and caused on this area of the world. And eventually he adopts Buddhism and becomes a Buddhist, and he repents of the war. And through that, he finds peace, and he tries to push and teaches Buddhism throughout the whole entire empire. And so Buddhism spreads greatly during this time. After Ashoka and this peace that kind of is being pushed, civil wars start to rise up in this empire. You also get foreign invaders that are starting to come in. You get the Bactrian Greeks, which are the remnants of Alexander the Great's forces. He came to Egypt, and then they kind of got left there. And so this is around the 2nd century BC, and they kind of start pushing their way around. You also have around 200 BC, the Kushans. Eventually you have the Gupta dynasty, which runs from around 320 to 535 AD. The Chandragupta I, he basically reunites all of India under one dynasty again, the Gupta dynasty. And he begins what's called the Golden Age of Peace, okay? During this time, again, no war, so it's total peace. And because of this peace, he has advances in art, there's advances in science, advances in medicines, advances in industry. They're all developed during this time. They develop zero as a placeholder in dealing with numbers and items. You can just have a zero, right? We have zero. And that's something we're completely accustomed to now. And the last group of people we want to talk about is called the Tamil people. And they're still a group of people that are very much alive in the India area as well. They lived in the southeastern coast of India, and they were never completely conquered by the North. They continued to trade with Rome and China. They were very independent and stayed alive, and they still are a group of people today. The book says that even today, Tamil separatists want to have freedom from the rest of India. They've never given up trying to be their own individual people. So, in conclusion, we went through these dynasties, started with the Aryans, and learned that, there was, Hinduism and Buddhism that kind of sprang up during this time, and it was spread throughout the empire by, Ashoka to start with, and then the Gupta dynasty with the Age of Peace. Eventually, the Gupta dynasty ends with the invasion of the Huns. And then things just kind of break up. And so at that point, there's just small independent kingdoms that are kind of dotted all over India for about 1,000 years. Lastly, your book says this. Hindu and Buddhist teachings did little to bring peace and security to the lives of people on the Indian subcontinent. Instead, they seem to have encouraged the people to accept suffering and misery rather than to try to improve their lot. Since one does not know in what stage of reincarnation he is, one can try his best but never know if he is making progress. This would seem to discourage trying harder. The various tribes and groups of India have been given to wars as much as other peoples, and the patterns of the past have definitely contributed to the ways of the present. Thanks.